Hello everyone, this is Craig from Chiaroscuro, and I want to thank you personally for purchasing the Chiaroscuro Retouching Action Pro set. This is something that we've been working on for many years now, trying to make sure that it is functioning properly, and it's going to be one of the best tools that you can get for the price to help you with your retouching process. We have been working on this for about 3 years now, finally getting to the point where we feel comfortable to fully release the retouching actions, because we've gone through and found almost all the bugs that we possibly can. Actions is a very interesting process, and the reason why we chose Actions is because we wanted to be able to cover as many versions of Photoshop as we can, along with when new versions come out, it should still work because the action system for Photoshop doesn't really change. When you have to work with plugins, you're usually going to have to wait for an update to the plugin when a new version of Photoshop comes out. So that means you're going to either have to be on an older version of Photoshop, or you have to just wait and deal with it. One of the reasons why we built this action set was because we used to manually do all these processes, and being able to make it a single click of a button made the speed just that much more significant. And these are tools that we use in every single one of our photo edits. So without further ado, let's dive into the process of getting it installed, and then showing you a couple of things that we can actually do with it. It's going to be very simple, nothing over the top, but further tutorials will be added as we go along, and the usage and how to be able to tweak some of the settings and everything necessary to be able to use this action set efficiently. So without further ado, you should get an email. Right now I got an email directly from Jesse, who's the one who has been finalizing everything and getting everything ready to go. So I just downloaded it. It should download it, and then once you get it, you're gonna see this. It's just a zip file, okay? And you can extract it. So I have 7-zip. You can use WinRAR, any zip program, and I think Windows even has one built in. And I'm just gonna extract it here into this folder. So there's going to be a text document and then the actual action file. All you have to do is double click the action file, and it'll automatically bring up Photoshop, and it should load it automatically into it. Now, you're not going to see it, you might not be seeing your actions, or if you use actions, you already kind of know how this all works. But let's just show you how to get into your actions, so that way you know how, if you haven't actually done this before. First thing you're going to do is, one, you need to have a file open of some sort, so that way you can actually get into it. Then you want to go to Window, and then go to Actions, or also Alt F9 in the case of the default shortcuts. You click that, and then it's going to bring up your action panel. And then you'll see right here that there's a nice little folder called Chiaroscuro Retouching Actions. We got the defaults. I don't ever use the defaults, so I usually just delete them, get rid of them. This is going to be based kind of off of a fresh install. So now we just got the Chiaroscuro Retouching Actions, and this is the default way of seeing everything, where you would have to click the file, or click what you want to do, and then hit play, and then it'll run the action. Which, granted, is you know, a way that a lot of people do things, but what I personally like to do is keep it in button mode. So if you click the twirl out, which is these dashes here in the upper right hand corner of your action panel, and you can click button mode, and then you'll see that it puts it into a little section like this, nice and easy. You can change the size of the window. I like to keep it, pretty organized, where all I'm seeing is that. If I had more actions, then you would see more actions in there, obviously. So the nice thing about the button mode is that it's just a button. All I have to do is click the button, and then it'll do it. And that's the installation process. It's done. It's ready to go and ready to be used. So the nice thing that we did with this action set was, one, we wanted to keep it light so it'd work on pretty much any type of machine. You don't have to have a big beefy machine to be able to do an action, and you have to sit here waiting for things to process over and over and over again. So we wanted to keep it light, we wanted to keep it simple, but we also wanted to be able to keep things organized when we were actually using the actions. Because when you start getting into the number of layers that you can get into in Photoshop, it can get pretty daunting if things aren't organized enough. And that's one thing that I want to make sure that, every time I'm doing edits and any time that I'm doing that stuff, that it is being organized enough to where I know how to find things very quickly when I'm inside of a certain file. So if you notice, we'll start off with something kind of simple. Right now I have a file open. I'm going to flatten this just so I can have a clean kind of slate, as if this is the way that you open the file. This one's already fully edited and ready to go. I just opened up a couple so that way we can kind of go over some stuff. So one of the first things that I like to do in any of the photos that I'm working on is a dodge and burn. So there's a simple button. You just click dodge and burn. It automatically will make all your layers for you. And boom, it puts it into a folder. Up at the top, it always goes to the very top. So that way, any new action you run from our action set will be at the very top. Then you can reorganize it if you want to into another position or another place if you want to. But then so as you can see, it made a folder. We twirl that down. It shows you your dodge and your burn. Now these are things that you can do yourself. It's very simple to do yourself, but it takes time. Every time you have to make a curve adjustment, rename it, place it, fill it with black, make sure that it's over and over and over again. You're doing this, and sometimes in some edits and folders, you want to break down your dodge and burn into multiple sections, so that way you're working on this section, you're working on that section. It makes it easier to be able to organize it very simply. So that's one of the beauties of this. It's also because it's an action set. It doesn't use plugins. It doesn't use anything else. So everything is the tools that are provided by Photoshop. These are things that you can use and build yourself if you wanted to take the time to do it. But the thing is, it also gives you flexibility in being able to control and be able to shape and do what you want with each one of the tools. This is basically a base that we've set up, that we've used over the years, that we found works best for us. Now, dodge and burn that's what I use. 99% of the time I use the dodge and burn button. Boom, I have dodge and burn. It's very easy to go. Tablet facing the right way. I can grab my brush tool and I can, let's say we'll set it to 85 and on the opacity, and we'll set the flow down to like, I don't know, 10. So we'll still see, and I'm painting with black right now. I need to paint with white, so I want to swap my colors. Hit X on the keyboard, and it'll automatically swap it. So now you can see that I'm painting, and I can dodge and I can burn with just that. Now granted, I'm doing very excessive. It's a very high flow. Normally it would be like 0.2 and a 60% on the opacity, and then I can go in and be a little bit more technical on how I'm going to do the dodging and burning, and I can control it a little bit, easier with those types of settings. But I'm doing it excessive because I want you to be able to see the results as I'm kind of working with the different things. But it's very simple. It's non-destructive, and that's one of the things that I like to do. Now, some people don't like to work in a non-destructive way. It's not my way of working. But that's why we have these other dodge and burn tools. So the blue section is basically your dodge and burn and anything to help you in the correction process of like skin work or shaping of the image and things like that. So you're going to have a helper button. The helper turns it black and white, pumps up your contrast so you can see the details and you can see what's going on, so you can easily work on your dodge and burn layers to be able to shape out the image the way you want. It makes it easier to do the skin work, things like that. And it's as simple as just turning it on or turning it off to be able to view it. But again, it gives you flexibility because you have control over what is going on with the tools that are being provided to you. These are all things that come in Photoshop. So that means if I don't want this to be as contrasty and I want it to be able to work with something that so it's a little bit more where I think I'm going to be taking the image, then I can that contrast a little bit. Or if I undo that, I can just lower the opacity of the curves to a more neutral stage, so it's not as contrasty, to work a little bit more in the shadow area and things like that. So excuse me, what it does is it just gives you a little bit of control over the tools that we are helping provide you within Photoshop, but all at the click of a button, right? And that's the key. We want to click at the button very quick, very fast, nothing over the top. So let's say we're working, hey, we're at a point where we like, but we got our base dodge and burn, we got our base skin work done. Now we just want to kind of smooth some things out. We want to get, the skin to where we want it to be. So we're going to pop in some frequency separation. 99% of the time I use the top frequency separation. The custom one is something that I'll go a little bit more in depth into in another tutorial. But this one is just very simple. You click the frequency separation button. It's going to make its duplicate layers. It's going to do all the things. Put it in a folder in the right hand corner in your layers section, and it's going to come up with a Gaussian blur. The Gaussian blur, what we want to do is we want to get to a point where the skin is just going to be just to where we're starting to get rid of the detail of it. And we don't want to be like crazy to where it's all completely gone, because we still want skin texture. And if you're working too strong or too hard on certain areas, then that's when you start to lose that detail and you get that frequency separation look. And so that's why frequency separation I always do after dodge and burn and after the initial cleanup of everything. So that way we're not fighting, a push and pull between the dodge and the burn and the frequency separation, and the next thing you know, you start to get a very fake look. And we don't want fake, we want it to be very clean. So we want to do something to where we have just a little bit of texture and we're still blurring out the skin layer enough that way we can blend out things. Now granted, this has already been done, so it's kind of hard to really delve into it too much and be able to show you like what's going on. I am going to go further into detail in other tutorials to be able to show you the usage and how to use these tools specifically and the way that I use them to make it easier for you guys when it comes to being able to use the tools inside of the action set. We just want to show you that it's here. We have a low and a high frequency. Your low is just your base color level, which means then you can make a new layer and you can actually, nope, sorry, control. They changed the shortcuts on me. It's a new Photoshop version, so I apologize. You can make a new layer, and then I can actually take a brush and I could actually, sample in here and paint, in here if I wanted to, and clean up with some airbrushing and boom, like that. But if we turn on the texture layer, you can see that that's there, but it's changing that lower area. But I mean, again, I'm not delving too deep into each one of the tools. I'm just showing you a quick overview of what the tools do, the purpose of the tools, and how easy it is to work with. So now we're going to twirl that shut. We got our helper. Now again, because we're thinking about this in stages, and we kind of have it set up in stages when it comes to the action set. A lot of people do frequency separation as one of the first things after cleaning up the major blemishes and things that, the big cleanup process. And then they go frequency separation, and then they do dodge and burn. And then they go into the highlights and the shadows and the tweaking of those areas. And then there's the color work and things like that. And this has all of that stuff in here. And that's the reason why, this is one of the comprehensive tools that I like to use. I use every single image. But you can always move your helper layer back up to the top and be able to pop that on to be able to check your contrast, be able to check your skin, make sure that it's doing what you want it to do and everything like that. And you can turn that on and off at any point in time. If you want to be able to solarize, you can actually do a solarize process, which some people don't understand what solarizing is, but you can go in and you can add a new curves adjustment, or you could use the one that was in there and just swap the 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 uh, the points for the other corners, and then you get the solarized. That allows you to see your shadows a whole lot easier and be able to work on your shadow areas without losing it. So you can actually have full detail in your shadows and be able to make a determination of how far you can go with your shadows. Sometimes we don't actually add that into the action because we don't want to confuse people. It might be something that we add in there just as a hidden curve until you need it or something like that down the road. But and we're gonna keep moving on, and then we have individual dodge and burn layers, which are going to be the curves, because again, that's 90% of the way that we like to do things is non-destructively. And so you can do that, pops it all the way up to the top every single time. If you want to do just a quick dodge or a quick burn on a certain something, or you want to test something out, it makes it very simple. And then there's the destructive dodge, or it's still not destructive, I'm sorry, but some people like to use the actual dodge tool, dodge and burn tool. So then we added the dodge and burn soft light layer, which all it is a soft light layer filled with 50% gray, and it's ready to go. You can paint with the dodge and burn, and it does the same thing ultimately as the curves. I just prefer the curves over the soft light layer. So that is in there for those old school people who love that version of doing dodge and burn. So then we go down, as I stated, there's some things like little helpers and things that we kind of go in stages when it comes to an edit. So this is organized kind of in stages. Now granted, I do frequency separation after dodge and burn, but a lot of people like to do frequency separation first, and there was a time where I did frequency separation first for a long period of time until probably the last couple of years, where now I do dodge and burn exclusively first, and then frequency separation is kind of a finalization to the skin work and smoothing out just the shadows to the highlights. And that's the purpose for me when it comes to frequency separation. And then so we have the next section, which is your highlights and shadows. And this is a tool to help you with color work and being able to kind of tweak out some sections of things. And I'm just going to show it to you real quick. But if you hit select highlights, it's now only selecting kind of the upper midtones to the brightest points of the image, which then if you know, and I'm just going to do this real quick, but then we could sit down and we could add, say, a solid color, right? And I could go into that solid color and say I wanted to do, since it's highlights, right? I can peak that towards the reddish kind of cream side of things, and I could do something like that. And then, you know, there's multiple different ways that you can, you know, play with these. It's just something, it's just a little additional things where you can get into your highlights and be able to kind of tweak things out. Go into your layer styling and use your blend ifs and be able to tweak out a little bit more how you want those things to kind of sit in those areas. But it gives you kind of a broad range from kind of 50% up to the brightest point, and then shadows is 50% down to the darkest point. So, and here's the shadows one. I'm clicked on the button, and then these are just selecting, so it's not making any new layers. These are what you want to do with them. So I mean, if I wanted to then do a new layer and put black in there, deselect it, and it's kind of the same thing. So now we just crushed our blacks. I can go in, do a blend if, and split the blend if, and then kind of tweak it out if I wanted to, you know, and you can do this with any color and any tone. You know, I'm just showing you the basics real quick because I wanted of what the tools do. So there's that. Those are the select highlights and select shadows, and those are some that can be used at this point in time. Because what we're getting into is your skin work, your teeth, your highlights, all these different things that we want to be able to kind of start working on. Selecting the highlights and shadows, getting things to where you kind of want them to be. This is kind of that stage. So then once we get those where we want, I'm going to remove these for now. I just wanted to show you kind of what they do, because again, this photo is already fully edited. do. So now let's get this filled up on the screen. So now we have skin tone retouch. Very simple thing. You click it, and this works off of what we found out to be kind of the average skin tone that we typically work with. Now, it's not, you kind of have to tweak things out. This is a tool that's a little bit more advanced, and when you get into it, you kind of have to play with things a little bit until you understand the tool completely. But I'm going to turn up my opacity again and my flow, so this way you can kind of see what's going on. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to paint in. So again, we worked off of kind of what the most average skin tone that we typically worked with over the years to determine what kind of was like a good starting point for skin tones. And it allows us to paint in. Now, this isn't meant to go over the entire image. It's going to look like junk. What it's meant to do is to go in and paint the areas that might be a little bit off from another area and you're having some weird tonality issues. This allows you to go in and kind of correct those tonality issues. Going in, so we got a little bit of yellow up here in the hair, so in the skin area. So we could go up here and clean up these tones a little bit, right, and get it to more of the natural tone process. But now let's say we're working with somebody with a different skin tone. So this image. So again, I've already edited this. It's all done. But we're working with different skin tone, right? And you can't really sit down and be like, oh yeah, this one color set, which is gonna work for every skin tone. No, there's no way that's possible. And it's not working with an algorithm to be able to select color and then determine the colors based off of that. It's a very simple process meant to work with majority of what you're going to come across, and then you have to tweak afterwards. So we sit and we hit our skin tone retouch. Boom, it makes the layers, right? This one there's a lot more that goes into it. So there's a lot more things that you'll see. It's selecting certain color tones and based off of certain areas. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop it up open here, and we're going to just paint. So, right? So granted, the colors are kind of one of the things that's going to make it a little bit harder to determine. But what we want to do is we want to select a color that is going to be closer to the person's skin tone that we're working with. Okay? And so this is kind of a neutral point on the red scale that works with most skin tones that we come across. If you want the super tan, no, this isn't going to correct. If the person's skin is black, no, this isn't going to work that way. You have to then go in and actually tweak out your color tones. And what we do, so this is highlights, we go to their skin and we select the brightest point of their highlights, and we see that it's in more of the magenta area, right? And we want to bring it back up because it is highlights. So it's only supposed to have a little bit of color in it. And is your shadows, and it says skin color, and then it says the shadows. Okay, so we want to select our shadows area, double click the color swab, and then we go hit our shadows. But again, we don't want it to be super dark. We want to select them, so as you see, boom, all of a sudden when I hit that, because I painted some in there at 100%, it was like, oh, we got to be that super dark. Well, no, that's not what I want, right? So I'm going to hit cancel. I didn't know that was an area that I selected already. Let's say we'll do the teal, right? I'll select the teal. Now it's working with the cream color and the teal to be able to get the tone that we're getting right here. But that's not going to work. What we want to work on is having it closer to the highlights area. They're not supposed to be so far apart that it doesn't, compute to the human eye. The main shadows, when you shift off your shadows and you do that in color and in your actual your grading process, it's a different process than working on correction. This is correction process. This is meant to correct skin tone problems. So I'm really selecting kind of the wrong image to do this with, but the idea is that we want to neutralize the tones between what's going on in each section of the photo based off of the skin. So if somebody has a super, like red splotches all over their face, this is meant to neutralize that red and be able to then make it to where the skin is much smoother and more consistent across the board. A lot of things about the high-end retouching process is about smoothness and consistency. If you have a lot of weird color shifting and weird things going on, red blemishes and things like that, you want to clean those up, and that's what the skin tone retouch is all about. Now, most of the time, you won't even have to change the color because it'll work with most skin tones because of how it's all set up. And I'm not going to get into all of the stuff and reason why it's broken down the way that it is, but that's the concept behind the skin tone retouch, is to be able to get it to treat the skin and be able to get things to smoothen out. Now, again, because I'm working on already edited photos and we're not delving deep into this, you're not going to see like the exact way it's supposed to work. You need to see the more advanced tutorials for that process, and those are coming very soon. Okay, so then we're going to get into whitened teeth. Everybody wants white teeth. We don't want brown teeth. We don't want black teeth, right? So now we hit our teeth white. Hit the button, boom, it makes all the layers, and now all you have to do is paint. It's going to make the teeth whiter. Boom, see that? Makes it not, so it does brighten it a little bit, so you want to be kind of careful, but I'm at 100% and 100% on flow and opacity, and yes, it made it brighter, but it's not to the point where it's crazy. So you just got to kind of think about it the way that you need it for each one of your photos. And remember that you can always turn the opacity down for any of these layers and have multiple of them to be able to create the effects that you want to create. That's the beauty of this. You can do them over and over and over again. And if it ever, feels like it's getting too big, flatten your. Want to be able to go back and tweak things and change things over time, but some people like to work with flattened imagery. That's more power to you. That's the way you like to work. I like to be non-destructive, and I like the means to be able to go back and be able to treat and change things if I need to. So teeth whiten, very simple. I mean, and it's a very simple process to be able to create it if you wanted to go in there. But you click the button, now you can make your teeth white. Again, opacity, you can change the opacity based off of your needs and that type of thing. Highlight Pop is a tool that I love to use. I try to get my image kind of in again, a consistent manner across the board. So it's, we don't have any like fully true blacks and we don't have any fully true whites. It's kind of right in between. So then when we start getting into the process of, equaling everything out the way that we want it to be in the final image, getting the contrast and everything, the Highlight Pop is beautiful. You click it, it's one button, it selects the brightest points of the image, and it adds a white layer, and it puts a mask on, and it just works on those highlights. And what's also nice about it is you can go into your layer style, and this is already tweaked because it's, again, we set it up to where it's what we base most of our stuff up. It's already using blend diff. It has a split layers off of the underlying layer, and then you can tweak it even more. You don't want it to be you want it to be a little bit more stark. You can make it more stark. You can bring in more shadow. Now, granted, it can look a little funky if you don't do things right. So we kind of work off of a base area that we found was a good happy medium spot, and it works on almost everything. And then we can go in and tweak everything. Any action set should be able to be tweaked very easily, so that way you're not fighting a battle constantly trying to figure out how to do things when it comes to your editing process, because you don't want to be spending so much time trying to figure something out as to actually getting work done. And that's the idea. We want to get work done, and this is just a tool to make it a little bit faster, especially a lot faster as you get further and further along with using the tool. So that's the beauty of the Highlight Pop. And granted, I already have this applied to this image, so it's already got that stuff in there. So it's really not something I would be adding now. It's just something I wanted to show you that you can do. Yeah, retouching. This one's a little bit more in depth because you got certain sections of the eye, you got the color, you got the red spots and everything like that. So the eye is, it's got a lot more to it. So you click the button, eye retouch, and then it makes a folder just like previously. Now, I work on a 4K screen, so it's pretty small, so I do apologize about that. But so you have all these different ones. So change iris color, darken makeup, add light to eyeball, add light to iris, clean eye whites here. It tells you what each one is, and all you have to do is paint with a white brush, right? With a white brush in those sections to do each one of those different things. And you can do some of them, or you can do none of them. You can do, all of them, if you wanted to. You want to clean eye whites here. All right, so we're going to clean the whites. See that? It takes away. Now, granted, I'm not being clean about this, but and I'm at 100%, which you would never be. But it gets rid of those red points, and yeah, it's desaturating it. That's that layer. This layer basically takes the reds, and it gets rid of those reds, right? So, and it works in a channel mixer, so it's working on a section of coloring. Now, granted, I don't know, and then there's an overall desaturation. But if you go into the reds, you see that it's desaturating that red. So, and then there's an overall kind of desaturation process too. And if you see the output channel is gray here, and that cleans up that redness. Now, granted, you don't want to be doing this at 100%. That's one of the things. Each one of the layers you could then adjust the opacity to. So again, a lot of versatility for each thing that's inside of here. You want to add light to the iris? Let's add light to the iris. Boom. We got to be painting in white. So X to swap colors. Now, see, now again, my brush is at 100%, so we don't want to do that. We're going to do 30% and let's say 0.2% on the flow. So 30 opacity, flow 2%. And then we can go in here and we can actually paint, but these highlight points. That's the purpose. Bring out the details of the iris without tweaking the colors too much and that type of thing. But it's going to boost it a lot, right? So, and again, adjust your opacity, paint in maybe a little heavy and lower the opacity to where you would like it to be. Boom. Nice and simple. Add light on the eyeball. Okay, so this is to take your iris or the whites of the eyes and adding a little bit of light in there, because a lot of people like to bring that out. I personally don't ever do that, so I usually just don't, but some people like to do that type of thing. So darken makeup. So this is to clean up your makeup edges and getting the edges nice and dark here. Let's bring up our opacity and our flow so you can kind of see. But it's going to mainly work on only the dark areas. So again, I'm doing this excessive because I want you to be able to see it. And I actually use this on my eyebrows if I don't get it in my dodge and burn. And then I just lower my opacity. Again, we're excessive right now because I want you to be able to see it through YouTube and all that type of stuff. But you lower it down, boom, you get it to where you kind of want. You can bring the iris back, the darkness of the eye. Boom, done, right? Again, already done in this image, so I don't need any of that. And then if you want to change the color, you paint where you want the color to be. Boom. And then you actually have a hue and adjustment layer to where you can just tweak out your colors based off of your needs. Sit down and lower the opacity. Again, it's all about what you ultimately want to do. I'm going very excessive on all of this because I want you to be able to see it. I use this a ton on almost every single image, and it's just, again, keeping things in stages and working in stages is one thing that I love to make sure that I do. That way I don't miss anything when I'm doing an edit. Okay, so there's that. Something that happens a lot in our editing process, especially with pushing with dodge and burn, we get some tweaks of our color tones, and the saturation will get boosted, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, and it's kind of hard to determine, especially with some monitors that aren't, like properly calibrated, or even, high quality IPS style displays or a 10-bit display. If you don't have that type of stuff, you need to be able to determine if you're oversaturated or undersaturated. And the next thing you know, you're throwing this up on a phone or something like that, and it just looks like garbage because you don't know what's oversaturated and what's not. And so we have a simple button here, oversaturation. Click the button, boom, it's going to show you your most saturated areas. And the things that are going to be the most prominent are typically going to be reds, and that's the things that you don't want to be oversaturated. You want your reds, I mean, unless like in this image it's a little bit less said because the pink hair, how the makeup's kind of done is in a fashion that's supposed to be strong and excessive. So yes, there are times where you want to push beyond what you would normally do, but in a clean editing and retouching process, you want to make sure that you're not oversaturating anything. So you twirl down the folder, and you got two layers. One's a temp visual aid, and it says delete. You don't have to delete it, you can turn it off, but it lets you be able to look at what is oversaturated. Then you can go into your desaturation layer, right? Desaturate here. And the beautiful thing, again, this is about the tools that you have available. You can make, a new saturation over and over and over and over again. You can do this, right? Or you can, what's beautiful about this, again, we're focusing on the parts that make things look bad. And reds are typically going to be the major issue when it comes to being oversaturation. It makes your skin tones oversaturated. It looks bad. It's just something like kind of right here underneath the nose. It's technically oversaturated. So what I would do is I would hit like 30% and then 2% on the flow, 30 on the opacity, 2% on the flow. And then I would go in and I would actually start painting in these areas that are just slightly oversaturated and bring those down. All right. We bring those down, and these are very subtle things. Typically, you can go a little bit heavier handed, but I like to be subtle about this type of stuff. And you go in, paint out these areas that are a little bit oversaturated. Again, we can do this on, I mean, I don't know if it'll hit the pink, but it should. So yeah, see, we desaturate that, boom. Oh, okay. It's not enough, right? But all I have to do is duplicate that layer, and I can do it again. If I feel like that, and I hit Control J, by the way, to duplicate that, that's Command J on Mac. I just duplicated that layer and it applied it again, right? And I could do it again as many times as I want. But what if I don't want to do it that much? I can lower my opacity. Or if I don't want to do it on every other part that I've done, well, then just fill the whole thing with black. Control backspace or delete on command, like I think, no, control. I don't know. I don't know Mac commands very well. Fill it with black. You can do shift delete or shift back space, and then you can set it to your black background. Boom. Okay. And then you can repaint, from there if you only want that section. Or you can completely redo the oversaturation layer button. I just add new ones as I go along, and sometimes I'll even just go in into an adjustment and go, hey, I want to just lower the saturation completely, then fill it with black, and then I can sit down and I can paint it again. You see? So the power is just understanding how the tools work. And then once you know how the tools work, it speeds up your process of being able to do this. And then you turn off the temp visual aid, and boom, now your tones are where they need to be. Granted, I'm being very rough about this, but I just wanted to show you kind of like the things that you would look for. And granted, that pink I want there, so I'm not going to actually do that. But it's, that's the beauty of that oversaturation, is that it's going to show you the areas that are just overly saturated and the things that you need to try to bring down. And it's a very simple process. It's meant to be subtle. It's like there's no 100% saturation removal with just one layer. You have to duplicate it if you want to go to 100% desaturation, which I don't think you ever would want to. But if you did, the possibility is there just by making more layers. So there's the correct oversaturation. So we'll turn that off. And then here's this is called anti-pink. You ever go and you take a picture of somebody, and around their nose is overly pink, and then maybe they got a little bit too much sun that day or something like that, and they're just a little bit too pink. Anti-pink is that button. It's meant to correct all of that extra red. Okay. But it also is, it puts a little bit of contrast in here. This is how we like it. This is the reason why it's set up this way. We like it because what it does is, if you look at the curve, it's taking those greens and down in the shadows, the problematic areas, and reducing those greens and neutral, keeping the reds where they're supposed to be. Okay. And again, this is a tool that you have the means to be able to work with, so you can tweak it as much as you want. If you think it's too much, you can just lower the opacity even more. And if you notice, it starts at 76%, right? So I'm going to hit anti-pink again. Boom, right? It's at 76. This is what we determined on 90% of our photos right out the door. This is going to work. This is going to be a good color stage, and it's going to reduce most of those reds. So that way we don't have to fight too much with, having the skin being all blotchy or weird. Sometimes you need that extra little bit of ink gone, or somebody's got weird spots on their arms. This can reduce that, things like that. But if you wanted to go into, you could still go in and tweak these. You could remove some of the greens from the skin. In the highlights, you could add some greens to the skin if you feel like it's not enough. The opposite of red is green. So you can tweak it as much as you want. So we remove, some out of the shadows, because that's our shadows. I typically do more of a tealish kind of feel, a little bit cooler than the skin tones, because we want some separation. And that's what that anti-pink does. This is one of the last things I always do to an image. I hit anti-pink, see if I like it. If I don't like it, I lower the opacity a little bit. Boom. It adds a tad bit of contrast to it, but it also smooths out those red tones a little bit. And in some darker areas, it'll add some red, so you got to be a little bit careful. And if that's the case, just go into your greens here and raise this one up, because it's this is the part right here. Adding a little bit of green into those mid-tones and highlights area, that's what's neutralizing that red. And the shadows we bring down just a little bit, because we want a little bit of red in those shadows. Because we find that with all this tweaking and all this stuff that we do, your shadows all of a sudden become a little desaturated, and it's just not enough detail or color detail of what's going on. So we added a little bit back into most images. Sometimes it doesn't work, so we just take that out of the green area, and then boom, we have everything that we need. And as you can see, there's a slight contrast curve to it. Very slight, very minimal, but it is there. And it just boosts it just a little bit. It's kind of a finalized step that we do. And that's what we like about it. Stamp visible, very simple. These are just kind of extra things that we added in. Stamp visible it's going to merge everything into one layer. It's also Control Alt Shift and E on the shortcuts command, but it's very simple. So you can just tap that real quick, and then we have sharpen image. You hit the button, boom, brings up a high pass filter. As much as you want. I would be careful. Usually about 2.5 is a good area, depending on the megapixels. This is based off of on the average for a 16 megapixel camera, because that's what we were using majority of the time during that time, was the Nikon D4S. So if you have more megapixels, you're probably going to have to increase the radius a little bit. But almost every time, either way, we would add the sharpness in, and then we would hit V, so the move tool, so we can move it, right? Move tool, and we would reduce the opacity by 50%. So hitting 5 on the keyboard would reduce the opacity of that layer to 50%. Very simple process, nothing over the top, just kind of a basic standard sharpening process. And I'm thinking about possibly making a sharpening action set that works with multiple different versions of sharpening, so that way you can kind of tweak things out. Also, with the sharpening, you can always So here's the sharpening. You can actually add into the black and paint away sharpening. Okay. Sorry, we haven't added that yet. So we'll add this to the next iteration. We're going to add a layer mask to it, so that way you can paint out what you want or what you don't want, or you can invert it and paint in the areas you want to be sharp. So some people just want to hit the eyelashes or the eyes, you know, and things like that. And so again, it's just, you know, simple tools. I don't do that type of sharpening very much anyways, but it's something that we added just so for those people who wanted to go through every single step and every stage to get through a full edit. And that is the action set. A very simple process, very simple tool, keeps things nice and organized, very easy to modify and change and work with. And we hope that you guys like it and hope you feel like it was worth the money that was put in. We have a few more action sets coming your way, including some color action sets to work with, you know, just correcting tones, working with colors, being able to go from one white balance to another white balance. And then we have other ones coming that are going to be more of your fruitful color work. So getting into the actual grading process, utilizing LUTs, color layers, masking, and things like that that are a little bit more advanced, but we're going to put those all into some action sets for you to be able to quickly go through and add color, work with color and adding some grain and things like that to kind of give it some filmic looks and different things like that. So pay attention to our releases and our newsletters, because we will be announcing those here soon. Thank you very much again for being interested in the action set, and we hope that you guys enjoy it as much as we enjoy it, because it saved us a ton of time and a ton of money, not having to buy a $100 action set or a plugin that is slow. The cost is good, and right now I think it's a good time that these things be released. To be able to work on a little bit more of a budget level type of thing. Again, thank you from all of us here at Chiaroscuro. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns about the action set or anything like that, please feel free to message us or email us at chiaroscuro@gmail.com, or through the website, or through any of our social medias. Thank you.